All right. We did good. We already messed that up. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to DirectXbox. This is number 20. We're back. Well, we were kind of here before. We did the stream for the Xbox show, and it didn't go over well. So now we know not to use StreamYard for any of that kind of stuff. We have to stick to OBS, I guess. It's so much so that it got claimed left, right, and center, too. I guess there was licensed music in there because it just got slapped with a bunch of them. I had so many emails that were just like, hey, copyright claim blocked in these countries, copyright claim. It was crazy. But I guess technically the StreamYard, you can download the recorded sessions and stuff. So it is Fridays. That's a nice thing, Javier, is these shows like DirectXbox happen on Friday night. So it'll remind you that it's Friday. So tonight it is myself and of course, Nate the Hate. Nate is here with us.
Yeah, at least for now, it's very stormy weather in my area, so we'll see how long the internet holds up as the Wii eShop music comes alive.
It's your entrance music.
Why am I the
like,
Wii eShop
I envision you
music?
walking down a ramp right now as we're like maybe some confetti. I don't know. Are you a confetti person?
Not really.
No confetti. Like if it was like if you were coming out, you'd rather have the pyro?
Yeah, I'd rather have the pyro with the music that hits as the flames and the fireworks are going off. So I would need something a little heavier than the Wii Shop music. Maybe something like this.
Okay, you'd have that. That's what you wouldn't have the broken glass like Stone Cold.
And yeah, if I have that option available. It kind of became some sort of weird Dragon Ball Z intro from 1994. Sounds like something Toonami would have produced.
Okay, I see we have people coming in. People are playing Elden Ring. I feel that that expansion is definitely will mess you up right away. Like it is like, oh yeah, this is Elden Ring. That's right. Because I still had to go beat Mog or whatever, and I walked in, crushed him pretty quick. It was like third try. But ever since I went to Erdtree expansion, it's been like, oh, I should probably level up while I'm here. I've been getting messed up in that thing, Nate. I've been getting messed up.
I haven't played enough of it yet to really get messed up. I just went to the castle with the giant spiders. And right now I've just been, enjoying my time with it. Haven't gotten my ass kicked by anything yet, but I feel as though there's probably a boss lurking in the next room that will kill me in one hit.
I played for like an hour and a half when it dropped, and then I went to sleep, and I haven't been home much today. So I was either going to play it tonight or tomorrow night, maybe. So I don't know. It's a busy weekend. I'm thinking next week I'll have a lot of time with it, but MVG apparently is just spending a ton of time with this thing. You got the whole collector's edition and everything. Man, he goes all out with Elden Ring. Elden Ring, Starfield, Assassin's Creed will go all out with that. Well,
yeah, that's true. He does buy those collector's editions that cost hundreds of dollars.
Well, he commits. I'll give him that. He commits fully. So I just want to give some people some time to get in here, but so we were having some timing issues before. That's why we ended up just doing the stream for the Xbox showcase, but we're back on track now, I think, back on schedule. And fortunately there's a lot of stuff that's happened with Xbox with their showcase, and even stuff after that with other showcases that have happened that have left people with a lot of questions around some of these weird ports that are just kind of missing. And then we also have, as soon as we finish this showcase, Nate, Microsoft says they have their biggest showcase, or their biggest showing, I should say, at Gamescom coming up that they've ever done. So it seems like right now Microsoft is getting rolling for the generation, and then also going to the next generation. So I figure we just kind of kick some stuff around as we're here, kind of getting back into the flow of things. I mean, I guess we could start with the aftermath of this recent showcase. We gave some of our thoughts, but they were like immediate thoughts, right? Like the show ended, we just started talking about whatever we felt right then and there at the time of what we saw.
Mhm.
But looking back on it now, Nate, I guess as you would always call it, like the honeymoon period, right? After we have an event of some kind, or a game just came out, typically
Mhm.
a week after maybe you beat the game or a showcase would have happened, you have time to kind of reflect a bit more on it and remove yourself from that initial excitement of maybe a big reveal. So
Right.
with
Mhm.
with that in mind, how are you feeling about that showcase now that we've had some time to kind of unwind and think about the things that were there?
I still look back at the Xbox showcase in high regard. It was a well-paced show. It had a lot of big announcements. We got a first look at a variety of games, and I mean, it's still one of Microsoft's best Xbox showcase ever put on, and not just of this generation, but the entirety of their existence in the console sphere. It was by far one of their better showcases, and I think it was the best summer showcase of 2024. And maybe some of the stuff that got me hyped on that day, I've now been able to evaluate a little further. And I still have that excitement, but it's just not as high to a degree as it was once. But I'm still quite high on the showcase itself. Just a fantastic demonstration of what Microsoft has in the pipeline coming in 2024, 2025, and even beyond.
Apparently, they could have shown more, to my understanding. At least that's what they said. And I will. The people at Microsoft do talk quite a bit. Like they get themselves into trouble. We know this, so they probably didn't have to say that, because we understand that there are still things going on within Microsoft right now that, like, predictions were thrown around and they weren't there. And it's like, well, yeah, okay, yeah, obviously there are other things that they could show, but that was a weird one to just put that out there. Although I guess they also have Gamescom coming up, but I felt like the show itself was, even still looking back on it now and rewatching some of the announcements, I mean, it's pretty packed. It was. And what would you say, Nate, looking back on it now? What's your I guess your favorite announcement there right now, or most impactful to you?
I mean, I think I would give that between two of the games that were presented. One of them would be Perfect Dark. I think it showed a great vertical slice of the vision that the initiative has with Perfect Dark, and how we will be able to play it in an immersive sim type setting. And it answered a lot of the questions of what exactly are they going to be doing with this reboot. And the trailer showed that it's going to be starting of the game with Joanna working for Datadyne, going after Carrington. And as any fan of the original two Perfect Dark games know, eventually Joanna Dark will go to the Carrington Institute and work to take down Datadyne. So it's going to be interesting to see how that narrative plays out, and even how we can approach the situations in the game. In the post-show interview, the initiative detailed how you have multiple options of how you can approach any objective. You can go in guns blazing, or you can go in with stealth. And in the gameplay demonstration that we saw at the showcase, they were really emphasizing the stealth aspect mixed a bit in with the combat. So I really liked that announcement, because it was able to assuage a lot of the concerns people had regarding Perfect Dark, even up to just about a month ago, where you had the reports coming out that it could be in development hell, that perhaps the game would never actually see release. So to see a demonstration that's strong for Perfect Dark was definitely calming. And then I think the biggest announcement for me in terms of hype was definitely Gears of War E-Day, and knowing that it is a prequel and how they're approaching the story of the game. Because when you look at the original Gears of War, the intro cutscene is exactly that. It is E-Day. And Dom Santiago and Marcus Phoenix, they're already established war heroes in the first Gears of War. Now, there's been Gears of War books. Even in the game itself, it alludes to some of the actions taking place during the E-Day invasions. But now to be able to play those invasions, create the tactics, or even the weapons, because E-Day predates the existence of the Chainsaw Lancer, and they emphasize that in the trailer. So now you kind of have to wonder, as we're playing the game, are we going to have some early rustic prototype version of the Chainsaw Lancer? Because as a development team was saying, it's not Gears of War unless you have a chainsaw on a machine gun. So at some point that has to come into creation. So we're going to have those early prototypes of those inventions. How are we really going to approach the game? And a lot of the invasion areas are well detailed in the novels and other literature around Gears of War. So to be able to see this really come into a game setting is going to be very exciting. So I think Gears E-Day was my biggest announcement in terms of hype. And I hope the report, I believe it came out of The Verge with Tom Warren suggesting that Gears of War could come out in 2025 is true, because I want to play that game as soon as I can.
Okay, so 2025 is what we're estimating for Gears. That'd be okay. I mean, if it comes out next year, that would start to even stack up 2025 if we're expecting that and maybe Fable to hit.
I mean, that's at least what the report is suggesting. I don't know if it's based on previous showings, because in the past, when the Coalition have shown a Gears of War game, it always released the following year. But when I looked back at Gears of War 4 and Gears of War 5, they had a much more substantial showing versus what we got with E-Day. So it's hard to really gauge at this point, because Gears of War 5 had a single player demonstration where you were going through a stage, similar with Gears of War 4. With E-Day, we just had the in-game trailer. We didn't have any gameplay on hand. So I'm kind of feeling maybe 2025 is in play, but I'm kind of expecting it is more than likely 2026 at this point.
If it's 2025, I feel like that's holiday 2025. So either way, it's very close to 2026. Basically, it's I think it's more than a year out either way. Like, I mean, it's a year and a half, 2 years maybe.
And 2026 would be the 20th anniversary since the first game's release.
Oh, okay.
I mean, that may not be a factor in their minds when it comes time to release the game, but that's just something that always sits in the back of my mind where it's, oh, we have an anniversary year. Plus, you also have to factor in that if there is indeed a Gears of War collection, a rumor that has gone around now just multiple times, that if you were to release it, you have to release it ahead of Gears E-Day. So if Gears E-Day comes out in 2026, 2025 is the perfect timing to release that collection. If E-Day is 2025, don't you kind of feel as though the Gears collection should have and would have been announced at the June showcase? Because now if you're talking a 12 to 18 month window, when are you announcing the game and when are you releasing it?
Well, if you do the Gears collection, okay, I know this will probably annoy some people, but if you do the Gears collection, I feel like you make that with the intention of targeting other platforms with it too. Again, I know people are still kind of like iffy on that whole situation with Matt Booty said some stuff this past week that still is very confusing about what they're even doing with that. So people are still unsure as to when something is announced. Is this sticking around just on Xbox for a year, 2 years, indefinitely? Or is this going to show up on another platform 6 months from now? We're still in that weird in-between period. But I think if you show up with a Gears collection that can maybe introduce it to PlayStation, but also people keep forgetting that Switch 2 is still in the wings right now. Like, we could see that 2025, right? I feel like Microsoft should be taking advantage of that system as much as possible. Like, as much as they can at this point. And just getting these IPs in front of a large number of people on the, like, we think the Switch the generation is going to also at least yield just how successful it's been. 100 million Switch 2 players or systems sold. We believe like it'll be another 100 million install base there. And that system should be powerful enough to handle most of these games. I think that is the way Microsoft should really go, because I don't think people mind much for. People don't really mind if PlayStation games are on the Switch. People don't mind if Xbox games are really there. It's more or less Xbox and PlayStation that people get kind of hung up on. People are just like, oh, yeah, it's the Switch, whatever. That's cool. Drop it on there.
There's still the public perception that this Switch isn't a direct competitor to Xbox or the PlayStation, whereas Xbox and PlayStation are direct competitors. And Sony kind of alluded to this as well in one of their investor briefings, where they were explaining experimental games of flagship franchises like Lego Horizon Adventure being one of those experimental games, that it would go to platforms that they don't view as direct competitors. And lo and behold, where's it going? It's going to the Switch. They view that as an avenue to bring in potential customers to eventually the PlayStation brand when a tentpole release in the Horizon franchise comes to PlayStation 5 or PlayStation 6, that the 10-year-old playing Lego Horizon Adventure on the Switch, now they're 15. They want to play the new mainline entry, And that's only going to be available on PlayStation 6, so they're going to want to buy a PlayStation 6.
Right. That's the nice thing about that is the Switch. It targets all audience, like a large audience, but there is a significant portion that would be younger gamers who will get older, go through high school and stuff, and then start looking at the high end game systems and go, oh, okay, well,
Yes.
I like Gears, so I'm gonna look for the system that has that, or enter the ecosystem on PC that has that. That's the thing with Microsoft is they're trying to cast this wide net. So I don't know why you don't just go crazy on that next Xbox system or next Switch as much as possible with that Xbox logo flashing everywhere and stuff as you're playing it. It seems like the Game Pass plan hasn't worked out on Nintendo's platform. They might be iffy about it, who knows? But like Nintendo, but one way or the other, we see things like Grounded go over there. We're seeing Pentiment, right? And I think if they can do it, Sea of Thieves will be on the next Switch. It's been incredibly popular on PlayStation. So I would tell Microsoft, go crazy on the next system because the fan base doesn't seem to mind. And I'm sure they can make a ton of money because that is a crowd that has no problem spending 60 or 70 bucks on games. They've shown it time and time again for remasters, remakes. People look at things like the new Zelda game that's coming out, and that people I see online are like, I don't get it. Do people really want this? And you see like the wish list and people putting it up pre-orders and stuff online, trying to get to this thing. Yeah, people will buy that stuff. So I feel like that's an audience you can get a lot of money from and then reinvest and show Microsoft in general, that gaming makes sense. We should go this route. So
yeah, I think if a Gears collection is ever to see the light of day, I do think it would be a multi-platform release. It just makes a lot of sense. And it also allows them to monetize it with further microtransactions because the Gears collection, you already can buy skins and weapon skins and all that. So you may as well put it on as many platforms as you can. And it's also beneficial to the player base. If you have more people playing, that's good for an online shooter. You want to be able to compete. You don't want to worry about people abandoning it on the Xbox and they're going to something new. By having it on PlayStation, Xbox, PC, and let's say Switch 2, you're always going to have an active user base. And that's something Microsoft definitely wants to invest and see happen with these games. So a title like Gears Collection is the perfect type of title to make a multi-platform release because, at the end of the day, it's not a brand new release. These are going to be older Gears of War games. It's not as though the Xbox is losing something of grand value. You're still getting Gears of War E-Day, which as of this moment appears it will be an exclusive release, whether it's for 12, 18, 24 months, we don't know. But allowing the Gears collection to go over there, you might get some lapsed fans who didn't pick up an Xbox Series console, maybe went with the PlayStation 5, play the collection, realize how much they've missed and love Gears of War, and say, wow, I got to play that prequel when it comes out in 2025 or 2026. And maybe I get an Xbox, or maybe I get it on PC, depending on the type of gamer you are. It's a gamble, but if you're Microsoft, what do you care? If you can sell a couple million copies on other platforms, that's money at the end of the day, and that's what they're looking for. They're looking to make money and expand the brand beyond the box.
I must wonder if they could even get some of the people from the Switch ecosystem to even just try it on cloud, because we've had cloud releases on the Switch, and apparently they must do better than I thought because we see them, they keep popping up. So I don't know if it's working out or what, or those are experimental releases, but I guess that's another avenue. Like the fact that I have an Xbox app on my TV and you just sync your controller up to the TV and that's it. It works. That is something I'm sure people would probably explore there too. It's all about just getting these games in front of as many people as you can within reason, without completely making your platform or your Game Pass general just irrelevant. So that's something that I think is gonna be very interesting to follow with even a lot of the games we're seeing now with Microsoft that have been shown. So one that I actually took away quite a bit from, Nate, was because you already mentioned Perfect Dark, which was probably my number one game from that show because there were so many questions around it. Probably Fable, mostly because there were a lot of questions still around Playground Games and how they'd handle the transition to, well, away from a racing game, open world racing game, sure, but to something that's more action adventure RPG. And while they haven't shown gameplay in the sense of, hey, let's sit down, let's run around for a bit. Like Perfect Dark has had more gameplay than Fable so far from what they've shown. They haven't done that sequence yet, but it's coming next year. All right. And I think we will get that kind of gameplay here, pretty soon. And I was really happy to see that it didn't get the expected, I'll say, downgrade that we see as games progress and they show them more and more. We always get that thing where people compare, like, okay, here's how it looks now versus then. It actually seems like it looks better now than it did then. Like, it's gotten better. So I think Playground Games is really poised to have a big, exciting release here. I'm still curious if they're going to tap some kind of live service element with this, because I know Microsoft, obviously the live service stuff is of great interest to them because they can tie it to their subscription service that then leads to microtransactions and so on. But so far from what they've shown in the limited amount, I think they've really nailed the atmosphere and kind of the humor of Fable. And that's something I was questioning with Playground, if they'd be able to figure out that direction for it coming off of the racing stuff. I think Fable looks great. Like I'm really looking forward to seeing more about that and it coming out next year. And I think the showing just continued to push that.
Yeah, I think the showing of Fable was exceptionally strong, and we got a nice blend of the cinematic sequences as well as the cutscenes. We saw her exploring a town. We saw some of the combat as well, where they were using magic, and you had the goblins lift up, and then they, she knocked the bow to shoot them. We saw throwing of knives. We saw some of the other hand-to-hand combat, and it nails the essence of what Fable once was. So right now, Fable does look poised to be a significant release come 2025, and you have to assume come, January of next year, we will have a significant deep dive look at the game, if the game is coming out later next year, because each year so far, Microsoft likes to highlight a game in a, significant way at the start of the year that is coming out a few months later. And Fable, we've now seen it twice. We just need a little better look at some of the in-game systems and, maybe answer a few more questions of, is there going to be a customizable protagonist? Are we going, is it going to have the good and evil? Just minor things like that that Fable was otherwise renowned for. So a few things we still need to learn, but I think Fable is definitely on path to be a significant release come next year and one I am very excited for.
A third party one I wouldn't give a shout out to because I saw a lot of people mentioning this, and I think this is a good get for Microsoft when it comes to Game Pass. This is going into Game Pass day one. Like, it was there, the logo, the whole thing. That's Claire Obscure Expedition 33. This is the turn-based RPG where it looks like they've sort of taken that action RPG where you have those command prompts that come up and stuff. It seems like they've integrated that and taken it almost to the next level with some very dynamic camera cuts, and it makes it feel so. The biggest thing I remember that was mentioned for Final Fantasy 16, and the reason they pushed that for being more action based, this from Yoshi P, is that it looks weird when the characters are just standing around because of how far we've pushed graphical fidelity. It looks strange. Like, we're almost a photo. We're getting close, but it looks way different than it did even back on the PS2. So it seems strange to see that. This game has kind of done this thing where they have a very dynamic looking camera that constantly is shifting and moving and trying to make it look very cinematic and like a lot of stuff's happening. And it could very well just be these character models standing on basically the ground. Like, if you just zoom the camera out, they're not doing a lot, but the way that they have it set up there, the impact they have when you do pick an attack, a spell, something like a physical attack even, and then you have to follow up with like pressing A to do more damage or B to counter and dodge. It just seems like a lot is happening, and it really keeps you kind of engaged there with what they showed. Visually speaking, it's interesting, I think. And the kind of the lore that they've described here is, I mean, it's out there, but I do like that if you're going to have kind of this fantasy RPG, which, by the way, this is made, from what I'm seeing here, being led by ex-Ubisoft developers. The game. So the way that they have this set up is you're on a quest to destroy the paintress so that she can never paint death again. And this is the 33rd expedition in order to attempt it. So I really like what I'm seeing here with this one. I think this was a great move by Microsoft to approach them to get it into Game Pass, as this is like their debut title. They were probably more prone to taking a deal like that, just to help them get to the finish line. Of course, a bigger security net there when it comes to funds. So this, I think, was a good move by Microsoft, because we do talk about them at times not really figuring things out well in development, or being able to recognize good games or talent, right? Or development, that kind of thing. I think they did a really good job recognizing this one as one to approach and bring in for Game Pass. So I think that was a good showing. It came away as one of the more interesting, unique looking titles, I'll say, from a show, especially from third party. And it was nice to see that Game Pass logo flash.
It's definitely a great Game Pass acquisition. I think my only disappointment regarding the game is that it's coming out next year. I was hoping it was going to be a 2024 release, because it did look really cool. I love the combat system that they had, the aesthetic design. It just looks like a very promising game, but we still got a year before it's going to come out, and we'll see how it turns out in the end. But it was definitely a good showing as a debut title for that development team, and excited to see what they do with it.
It's interesting because we've talked about like just Game Pass in general, getting people to try games they wouldn't otherwise. And you even suggested the game today to Sean, right?
Yes.
And what do you suggest to him?
Oh, what's the name of the game? Still Wakes the Deep.
And what did he say? He said, "Oh, Game Pass. All right, I'll check it out." It was that quick, right? It wasn't like decision, like, "Oh, how much is it?" But Game Pass. Yeah, sure, I'll go download it, try it out. So that's another thing for a debut game like this. I think this is a deal that works really well for both parties. So people will just try this game out because it's on Game Pass. So that is, I think, a nice thing all the way around to see. So I'm very interested in this one. I'm actually going to follow this one pretty closely, because I like what I was seeing there. I've been waiting for someone. I thought it would be Square Enix. I'm waiting for someone to try to, rather than push away the turn-based mechanics and RPG that we grew up with, I've been waiting for somebody to really refine it and try to take it to the next level. Square seems less interested now from just the direction they've gone with their recent releases, and that's fine. That's what they want to do. Just I was hoping someone would try it, and this seems like that attempt. So I'm keeping an eye on this one. I'm excited for it. I'm excited.
Yeah, I think it surprised a lot of people when that game kind of appeared during the Xbox showcase, and it surprised people for a good reason. It just looks as though it's going to be quality. It's giving that RPG that people have kind of just been waiting for such a long period of time that no one is giving. It is it looks as though maybe it's a high-end AA, low-end AAA turn-based RPG. And one thing, when I look back at that trailer more and more to see the combat sequences, and maybe it's just me, but it has those quick time events blended in, and it gives me flashbacks to Lost Odyssey.
Oh, it does. It does. You're right. And the art style kind of too, sort of.
A little bit.
Yeah, this does look a little like Lost Odyssey. You're right. I'm kind of looking at some of the screenshots right now. Yeah. Oh, because it does that thing where it goes behind the character and it, like, the camera shakes a little bit and it looks really intense. Yeah. That's a good point. So this might be the Lost Odyssey follow-up right here. This might be it.
And it's interesting how they went that path. And I mean, I really want to just see the game again, and probably gonna have to wait till next year to really get a deeper look at it. But it definitely has the attention of a lot of people right now. I'd say that was one of the surprises of the show. Not even the show. I think that was a surprise for the entire summer. Had that been at Summer Games Fest with Jeff Keighley, it would have caught a lot of attention. For Microsoft to be the stage that they could debut it with the Game Pass, I think it just got more people interested in the game.
Yeah, you're right though about that. I'm actually surprised they didn't. I mean, I guess they wanted to be an Xbox showcase, but like Gamescom is right around the corner. I'm almost wondering why they didn't end up in Microsoft's Gamescom show, which they could actually still be out there. In fact, I would expect them to be, because I mean, Microsoft be there with the biggest show. Apparently, it's like, hey, why not attach ourselves to this thing? So you're right though. Maybe it got kind of lost in the shuffle because there was so much stuff happening there. But I saw it. I'm keeping an eye on it. I got you, Claire Obscure. We'll see what you have. Demo might not be bad though. Just saying, throwing out there. Demo might not be a bad idea to plan for next year. Just to throw it out on these systems, because it is. While it is going to Game Pass, it is also going to. I saw it's on Steam, of course, through PC. It's also Epic Game Store, and it's on PlayStation 5. And who knows? Maybe they'll get it on the the Switch do at some point. They'll get it there as well. So keep an eye on it.
Maybe.
Keep an eye on it.
Maybe.
I do want to move over though, Nate, to there were people in the chat even mentioned this, like some comments from Matt Booty, which I just said they keep talking, they keep saying things, and it's not doesn't seem to be it never seems to work out for them when they start talking in these interviews. Like it always turns into something online. And I know they have to give them because questions, of course, be asked. I just never see Sony or Nintendo end up in this situation with interviews like these. You notice that it just doesn't seem to happen much to them. And I guess it's just because Microsoft is more consumer facing with their top executives. Like Matt Booty, Sarah Bond, Phil Spencer. They seem to constantly be in interviews, and there's always at least one or two lines that get pulled from it that get just ripped to shreds online. So the most recent one.
Public facing, but I also think it's because they are a Western company versus the other two being Japanese. Okay. Because you will see the occasional Bloomberg or Nikkei interview with, Nintendo and such that the Western media does not have. And because Microsoft is the Western company, they just seem to be constantly talking. And it is likely because, as you said, they are a very public company. And whenever they're talking about the Xbox sector of Microsoft with financial outlets, is that they have to talk about some of these initiatives like Game Pass. And then naturally it comes back to the gaming sphere, where sometimes it is taking out of context, because if you're talking to investors and financial people, what you're relaying to them isn't going to be the information that gamers want to hear, because it's business. So it's not as curated as it's not as curated as we're accustomed from getting from other gaming CEOs.
I think so. We had Matt Booty recently. He was recently talking about Tango Gameworks. This was with Variety's Strictly Business podcast, which is an interesting source for this to come out of. But a lot of the headlines were that Matt Booty implies Tango Gameworks closure was partly due to leadership change. And so the quote that people are looking at here says, I think the thing to be considered is that for us, it's as much a forward-looking situation as much as it is looking back at one certain game. There are a lot of things that go into success for a game. What leadership do you have? What creative leadership do you have? Is the team the same team that shipped something successful previously? And we have to look at all those things together and then ask ourselves, are we set up for success going forward? And while there may have been factors and situations that previously led to success, they may not all still be in place that you look what you're doing going forward. So he seems to be, the thing people took away from this is because Shinji Mikami left, he seems to be saying that, well, the leadership when it was altered affected that studio in some way to where we decided it wasn't necessarily a group that we were going to go forward with to start a new project, which we know they, at least through reports, they had pitched Hi-Fi Rush 2, and I guess they evaluated it, and they're like, well, that's going to take 4+ years to get done. No, we're good. But the thing I think that's so interesting about this is there were some other mentions that, well, maybe they were trying to figure out how they could let them go independent, similar to what happened with Toys for Bob, where Toys for Bob is now independent, but they're still working with Microsoft through like contracts. And apparently they've now spun up their next game through, I guess, funding or partnership with Microsoft. But I guess Tango Gameworks wasn't able to attain that same kind of setup or structure or freedom. So people are, of course, all over Matt Booty on this one. And it's just, the Tango Gameworks thing, it seems like he's trying to dance around the topic pretty heavily, obviously, as like PR speak. But there's just, it's no matter what he said here, it wasn't going to work. Like it's pretty clear that they just did not want to continue on with Tango Gameworks in their current setup and structure for a game that was going to take another half decade to get out. No matter how well it would be received, because Hi-Fi Rush 2 probably would have been received around the same. Who knows, maybe better than the first Hi-Fi Rush, and at least would have been unique. So what was your takeaway with the quote from Matt Booty, Nate?
I mean, it's just another situation of you're talking on a topic in which nothing you're going to say is going to lead to any goodwill for your brand. even if what you're saying is factually true, which is questionable, it's not something that the gaming community wants to hear. And there's so many things that could have happened behind the scenes regarding Tango that we don't know about.
Yeah, that's
Could
true.
Microsoft have potentially tried to sell them and there were no interested buyers? Were they trying to work out a deal similar with Toys for Bob where they could go independent and Microsoft would sign them on for a project like a Hi-Fi Rush 2 or a Ghostwire Tokyo 2, and the deal just didn't come together? We don't know what efforts were made prior to the closure that just did not gel. Or if it was simply they came in, looked at the books, and said, you know what? It's going to cost us too much money to keep you operational for what you bring in revenue with a new release. It's easier for us to just drop you because when we were buying ZeniMax, you really weren't a factor in our minds. You just came along because you were part of the package. You weren't something we were actively seeking out.
They seem
We don't
pleasantly
know all those
surprised with Hi-Fi
details.
Rush, right? Oh, you guys are working on this. Oh, cool. Okay, great. We'll put it out next year. Like, I feel like
Yeah,
that just kind of fell into their lap, you know?
Yeah, they were so hands off with that project that I don't think they really knew exactly what they had going on there. And that was a thing that early on in these acquisitions that some people were praising Microsoft for being. They were being hands off. They were allowing ZeniMax to operate as ZeniMax. So the leadership could just continue to operate the way they previously did without Microsoft interference. Now, once they shipped the products and Microsoft was looking at books and looking to make cuts, Microsoft began to run some of that interference, partly due to Redfall being the disaster that it was. Had Redfall come out, reviewed well, and performed well, maybe Tango would still exist.
Oh man, you think it's possible that Redfall really doomed them that bad?
There's far too many unknown variables.
Oh man.
Well, look at what happened following Redfall. Microsoft came out and said, Microsoft came in and they had to say, we're going to have a more hands-on approach with Starfield and other things happening at, the ZeniMax studios. So what else was going on? And we don't know the type of projects that Tango had in the pipeline. What projects were pitched that were refused? What projects were they actively working on that weren't coming together? And even with Shinji Mikami leaving, they did have other talent leave over the years. Ghostwire Tokyo's development wasn't smooth. Talent left from that, and she went on to start her own studio and just showed her game. I forget her name at the moment. Was it Nakamura?
She was because remember she was on stage and people really liked her there, and it kind of thrust her into the spotlight, and now she's got her own studio.
So, I mean, like, talent was leaving the studio. You still had some high-end talent who put out Hi-Fi Rush, but we don't know the efforts Microsoft made, or maybe the efforts Microsoft didn't make. But at this point, Matt Booty, Phil Spencer, Sarah Bond, everyone involved in the Xbox side of discussion have to stop bringing up Tango. And they have to stop trying to justify the layoffs that they had to make. Because every time it's a new quote that just goes through the news cycle and it brings them more ridicule and mockery, whether what they're saying is financially sound or not, it's something that the gaming community does not want to hear. They don't want to hear you try to justify your actions of laying off people from a studio who put out a high quality game, then ported it to the PlayStation 5 and was shut down immediately following that. It's just bad optics. So maybe one day there's a deep dive into what happened at Tango. Maybe we find out Microsoft did try to sell them and there were no interested buyers. Maybe we find out Microsoft was working with them to try to allow them to go independent, and the deal just wasn't coming together financially with what Tango needed and what Microsoft was willing to pay to support a new Hi-Fi Rush 2. Hopefully that happens in the next 5 to 10 years, just so we have some answers. But at this point, they have to stop discussing it because nothing good comes out of it whenever Matt Booty opens his mouth.
I feel like, obviously he was asked about it because if you have him on a podcast and you feel like you might be able to, I don't want to say blindside him, but catch him a little off guard with a question and get something new out of him, it's going to just be good for your show or your podcast then. But yeah, I think you're right in the sense that, look, it's not a great conversation to have in terms of PR, and having it or just saying anything to it, not going to matter unless your next sentence is we're reopening Tango Gameworks. It's not going to lead anywhere great for you. So I think you're right. I think there is still a lot of information we're missing from the whole thing, a lot of context, and maybe we'll find out eventually in some kind of report, because we did find out that their pitch was apparently for Hi-Fi Rush 2 through a report. So maybe something will come out. It did seem like some of the people at the studio weren't very happy with Microsoft based on what the stuff they were putting out on Twitter X, where they were taking pictures of their awards and that sort of thing. There was like a pizza party that happened, so I don't know.
See, the thing that I see a lot of like the industry folks, they took pictures of their BFTA awards and their game awards and all those types of awards. At the end of the day, in business, I don't care how many awards you win. If you're not a profitable company, it doesn't matter. And that's the hard truth in the gaming industry right now, is that you have VCs, you have investors who want a return on that investment. They don't care how many awards you're winning if you're not selling copies. Are you going to invest tens of millions of dollars into a project that's winning Game of the Year and all these other awards, but you had a net loss in the tens of millions of dollars? Or would you rather invest $100 million into a game like Call of Duty, which won't win an award for anything, but make you $1 billion? To
be fair, Call of Duty costs a lot more than $100 million to make, but I get what you're saying.
But it makes them a lot of money at the end of the day.
It does. It makes a lot of money. Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's not going to win anything, but it generates revenue versus a smaller game that generated nothing but one.
Is that a little bit of a, I guess that is kind of a difference for Microsoft versus Sony and Nintendo, where we'll see them sometimes, I'm going to assume, just based on some of the sales figures of certain franchises that are popular online, but then you look at them, you're like, oh, that's all it sold. It makes you think about how, from a Sony or Nintendo's perspective, they will put the money in just for, we've talked about like variety for platform, and I'll just say Bayonetta. That's one that people don't realize how little that franchise technically sells, but it's there to provide variety for Nintendo. And yeah, technically, sure, it'll win awards, but things like that, it is interesting that they don't necessarily find value in that image that's portrayed, that level of quality that's portrayed from it, when you can make up that kind of loss from something like we just mentioned with Call of Duty, where it will just make you stupid amounts of money. The campaign last year was terrible. Got like 3 out of 5 or 3 out of 10 by many players. Didn't matter. Game's doing incredibly well in terms of revenue. So that's the thing that's kind of interesting to me, is the variety for Game Pass is the most important thing, as well as good games, obviously. But you want to be able to hit a bunch of different areas of gaming in terms of genres. And something like that Hi-Fi Rush is so weird and different. I think it does add value. Even if you lose money in terms of sales, I think there's value there just for it existing as a good product in a service like that.
Yes. It's a good product for that diversity's sake in your game library. But now when it comes up to, you have to greenlight future projects. You have to greenlight more stuff for this company. Are you going to greenlight and The Evil Within, a franchise that didn't sell all that well? Are you going to greenlight Ghostwire Tokyo 2? Are you going to greenlight Hi-Fi Rush 2 if now the budget, let's say it even doubled in terms of budget? Are you going to approve
I bet the Hi-Fi Rush 2 would have, that budget would have jumped. Absolutely would have.
And this is a game that wasn't doing huge sales numbers. It came to PlayStation 5, and based on PlayStation charts, it didn't do anything. So
you think
if
they get that on the Switch, it's going to significantly boost it? Like, do you think the Switch audience would latch on to Hi-Fi Rush? I feel like there's an issue with this game now. I don't know why it's not on the Switch, other than they're having a hard time getting it to hold 60 frames and stay in sync with music. That's all I can think of. So maybe it's going to be really, here's the problem. Okay. The issue is they did this so fast without seeing like what this game could do if it was in front of an audience that might be a bit more, I don't say accepting, but interested in this game. And yeah, that is probably on the Switch too. Like, let's just say they did port it over. It's there. It's ready. They have their Switch 2 development kit. It's like, all right, this thing's running fine. We're going to be there in the launch window for the system with this. It comes out on the next system. It does incredibly well. Sells millions of copies. And they're like, oh, we shut that studio down.
Yeah, I think
that's kind of the issue I feel like they could run into there.
I mean, they could run into an issue just with closing Tango as a whole. They definitely should have given them a little more time to see what they could, produce and see how the games are received in the future.
Yeah.
But the issue with like, oh, if it comes to Switch, would it do better? This conversation has kind of come up with other games over the course of this generation. And when the games came to Switch, they generally did in line with what people kind of expected. They came, they did okay, and they moved on. Because one thing that we definitely see now more than ever is that there's a lot of overlap between Xbox, PlayStation, and Switch owners. It's not as though this Switch base is 90% only owns a Switch. Even if it's in the area of, let's say, 40% of Switch owners also own an Xbox or a PlayStation, if they're not interested in playing Hi-Fi Rush on the platform they already own, they're not going to become interested in Hi-Fi Rush once it comes over to the Switch. Would there still be a user base? Probably yes, maybe 100,000 people. Even that might be too high. Hi-Fi Rush, I feel as though it has the same issue that Wonderful 101 had, be it on the Wii U or even when it came to the Switch and PlayStation, is that the people who really like the game will praise it. But there's just something inherently flawed about the game's appeal that keeps people away. Whether it's the price, the visuals, something prevents interest from gathering around this game. It had ton of positive word of mouth when it came to the Xbox. It still didn't do huge numbers on Steam. Why didn't Steam cling to the game? Wouldn't that have been a good platform for people to pick that game up? But they didn't.
Yeah, it jumped recently, but it was mostly around the time of them announcing they were closing down. All of a sudden, people positive review bombed it. It was very interesting, and then people started playing it again because of that.
But like, where were those people when the game came to that platform? And then again, you had the positive word of mouth from Xbox and Steam. It comes to PlayStation 5. It didn't do anything. Where were those people saying, "Oh, I wish I had that game on PlayStation"? Then it came, and they didn't buy the game. So why aren't they buying it?
Sea of Thieves, that took over there. Actually, you know what, Nate? That does bring me to interesting situation when it comes to the PlayStation Store and Microsoft. But first, I do want to give a shout out to the members over on the Spawncast network, because there are some producers over there that I have to recognize because they are supporting. They've been here a while. John O, executive producer, Joshua Butts, Mr. Joby. We have Justin Maverick, the Game Orb, Trent A. And I want to give a shout out to one of the star supporters here with 1 billion cats. There's a lot of cats. Shout out to all the people over the Spawncast Network. You can check that out down below, spawncastnetwork.com. We do appreciate the supporters there making all these different podcasts that we've spun up possible. But Nate, I do want to bring this up because Microsoft is kind of taking over PlayStation's sales charts. I don't know if you saw this, but Sea of Thieves was the most downloaded game on the PlayStation 5 for May. And even leading up to that, Microsoft, by the way, mentioned this a couple of times in different interviews and appearances, that they had several games in the top 10 on PlayStation's store, which, yes, Call of Duty is one of them. They it's theirs now. I don't tell people they own Call of Duty.
Yeah, I mean, some of their claims, they are taking credit for things that they now own. Like, look at the Activision games. That's ours. Look at those Bethesda games. Those are ours too. But like, the game's Fallout 4. You didn't even own the company yet. Like, it's ours now. Be like, okay, Microsoft,
this is mine now.
Calm down.
That meme.
Yeah, it's basically what they're like. You released 4 games earlier this year. One of them is high on the charts. The others are from the companies you bought. It's kind of like last year where they came out and said, Call of Duty had the biggest launch ever for us. Like, it's not yours.
Yeah. Well,
you had nothing to do with the game.
I have to give them credit though for Sea of Thieves, because they were there from the beginning with Rare. You know, it took them a while to get it to where it is now, and they drop it on PlayStation, and this ecosystem welcomed them with open arms for this game. Shot to the top of the charts. It's downloaded the most in May for the PlayStation 5. It's kind of taken over the PlayStation 5 in general for live service stuff. And then Call of Duty is there. Fallout explodes up the charts. I do wonder if I'm Sony, if I'm looking at this like, whoa, hold on a minute. Like, it was fine because they were bringing these games over. It's like, all right, cool. We'll make some money off of Microsoft. All of a sudden, they're looking around like, wait, these are all Microsoft games up here. What's going on? And they haven't even, I'll tell you this, Nate. The day, if it does happen, that like Halo Master Chief Collection or Halo Infinite the free version of the multiplayer jumps over to the PlayStation, I will guarantee you that tops the charts as well in that month. It absolutely will. And all of a sudden, it'll be like the top 6 games. 4 of them are from Microsoft. Like they kind of take over the PlayStation Store. And this does sort of feel like what Microsoft's vision was. It's like, hey, you know what? Sony does those narrative driven single player experiences really, really well. Like they're the best at it, basically. But we do live service stuff really well. We do multiplayer well. And that's kind of something that PlayStation, first party wise, has kind of been spinning their wheels with, like Destruction All-Stars. They found some traction with Helldivers 2, obviously. But then they like cancel Last of Us Online. And I feel like that probably would have done well there. But now it's kind of like that lucrative live service section is kind of being covered now by Microsoft.
What do you mean? Sony has Concord.
Well, they do have Concord. They do. You're right. They do. Gosh, I forgot about that game for like the last 2 days, and it was great.
Isn't there a beta in like a month?
You know what? I will try the beta. Although, hold on.
No, you have to pre-order the game to get the beta.
Oh, you have to pre-order. Why are they doing that? Like, just
so, but you get like
people.
What is it? If you pre-order it, you get 4 beta codes.
All right, Nate, you're going to pre-order it.
I am not pre-ordering that game. If someone gives me the beta code, I will play it because I am reserving judgment until the beta hits.
I will try it as well. I will. Because who knows? Maybe it's good. The people who have worked in the industry for quite a while apparently are part of Concord's team from like Destiny and stuff. So like they have knowledge, but I'm saying I don't think Concord's all of a sudden going to come out and knock off Sea of Thieves or something. Like I think Microsoft has kind of quietly entrenched themselves on the PlayStation charts for a sector that Sony is really trying hard to make a claim to. And they kind of got beat to the punch already by Microsoft, it feels.
I mean, Microsoft has devoted a lot of time to really cultivating these games that we're mentioning, like Sea of Thieves. This was a game that when it originally came out, people were kind of, what's happening here? What exactly is this game?
Yeah.
It wasn't game. It launched in a kind of a rough state, but Rare kept with it. They kept adding to the game. They even put out the documentary where they have Sean in it saying, I think this game will be killed in 6 months.
They buried Sean in that documentary. They buried him.
Yeah. 10 years later, the game is thriving with over 20 million players. But like Sea of Thieves took a long time to become what it did. Grounded continues to expand and grow, and it has a very active user base. It's just Microsoft, during the Xbox One generation particularly, and even now, they're willing to continue to invest in these games that do have that active player base, whereas Sony has tried to get into live service games, and it's just been a constant failure on their side. And when the games don't seem to click immediately, Sony doesn't want to continue to invest in them. They see the first 6 months, say, okay, we've lost 90% of our players. Let's pull it back. That's the end of it. Or the games never even come out. Like The Last of Us Factions, which was in development for years. They were also working on a Twisted Metal game that's been canceled. So Sony is a little reactive when it comes to their live service games because they don't want to have that long-term commitment where they're sinking money into a project that may never find a base. But if you look at other companies, aside from Microsoft, who has invested and stuck with their successful projects, they've killed a number of their own, like Bleeding Edge. But you look at Square Enix. Final Fantasy XIV came out. Wasn't a huge success out of the gate. They took it in and essentially rebooted it. And now look at it. People are excited for each new expansion when it comes out. In World of Warcraft is still a thing. We have Elder Scrolls Online continually getting new content. And it's something at this point, Microsoft has say in with Bethesda and ZeniMax, or even Fallout 76, which apparently is a good game now. It took years, but now it's a good game.
Yeah, it did take a while. And that got a big spike from the Amazon series, obviously, like you mentioned. But I will say for Sony, they do have Destiny, and apparently the new expansion for it was really good. And I don't know if that's going to be a send-off for it, because I do think Destiny 3 should be their next thing, because I've wanted to get back into Destiny, but it seems like it's one of those situations with an MMO. You feel like you're so far behind that you're just never going to catch up. And it's like, I just don't, I want to kind of be where everyone else is at the start and just go from the start, like the starting line all at once, like at least be within proximity to it. So that's one of the reasons I'm kind of waiting for Destiny 3 to come out, but this last one did really well for him. So that aspect has at least where Bungie's kind of redeemed themselves with that situation. Marathon, I'm still unsure of. So I'm looking at the across the landscape, and it just feels like Microsoft right now with their live service push to get their stuff on PlayStation. And I mean, I think the Switch 2 will definitely be a target for a lot of these games, since it should be able to run basically all of them. I think they got something here when it comes to their porting for revenue's sake. Because we're still up in the air with some of these other games. Like I don't know, Indiana Jones, Starfield, Blade. I don't know if they're going to just be on Xbox only forever, but it's hard to say. I will tell you, if Master Chief goes, nothing's off the table.
I think it depends in which form Master Chief goes. If it's, let's say, Halo Master Chief Collection, I don't really view that as like a significant loss. Or let's say,
really interesting.
Let's say the report of the Halo Combat Evolved remake remaster, however it was dubbed in the report, is also true. It's Halo 1. My thing is going to be, is the next
classic
mainline Halo going to be exclusive or multi-platform? Because if the title that comes after Infinite, if that's exclusive, then I'm not concerned about the older games. Because that's just Microsoft doing what they're doing with Sea of Thieves and Grounded and Pentiment and Hi-Fi Rush. Or even the fabled Gears of War collection. They know there is a base that will play the game. It doesn't really hurt them at the end of the day. It just allows them to expand their brand a little more. So it really comes down to the execution of those releases. Even Indiana Jones or Starfield. Let's say Starfield goes to PlayStation in holiday of 2025. Is that a significant loss to the Xbox brand if it took a year and a half? Actually, it would take 2 years. It took 2.5 years at that point. At that point, the Xbox players had Starfield. You had the expansion. So if a year later it goes multi-plat, what did the brand really lose at that point?
I think it looks weird because Master Chief has been so closely aligned with the Xbox itself, dating back to its inception. Like the Xbox came out, Halo is there with it, and that's what pushed it through that holiday. And let's be real, the entire it was a short generation. 4-year cycle was pushed by Master Chief, Halo 1 to Halo 2 for the most part, right? Those were the big games for that console from Microsoft. And I think because of that, and it was there from the beginning, it's been there every generation with the 360, the Xbox One, now the Xbox Series. I will say though, Halo's been kind of...
Is Halo the flagship franchise it used to be?
No, it's not. And that's the thing that's a shame because... So I will say this is going to be a hot take. I already know it. When the next Halo is ready, so they're in Halo Infinite, word is they might be playing around with the Unreal Engine. They might be rebooting stuff again. They might be working away from what they've done with Halo Infinite into like a new age for Halo, but still keep Master Chief. I don't think you do a free-to-play multiplayer. I think you go back to the roots and you have your classic arena style that is just part of the main game. You sell it if you want, a la carte, but it's also in Game Pass, and I think that's how you do it. It just seemed weird because they had everything so discombobulated with Halo Infinite, where the campaign was over here, and then you had like, oh, we're bringing the firefight mode here, and then the multiplayer is the separate app that's free to play, so you don't technically have to pay for it. It's just, I don't know, it's just kind of all over the place. I would much prefer them to go back to how they released Halo 3, Halo Reach, anything where just the multiplayer was part of that, and that's it. Like, just go back to the classic arena style shooter and don't mess around with the free to play stuff as much. I know it seems weird because it's like, well, you're lowering the barrier, you're raising a barrier of entry. I don't know. Something about it feels like we lost that original arena shooter where you buy a game, the multiplayer is there. It doesn't have to be this ongoing live service thing. It doesn't have to be. It can just be a good multiplayer arena shooter that you occasionally update here and there with bug fixes and patches and maybe do fun community events, and you don't need 100 some odd people just to hold up the live service element. You don't need all that. Just I feel like the community, if they really like the game, like Factions was, as we mentioned, PlayStation, but also like Halo has been since back then, I think you can still have a really good multiplayer experience that doesn't have to expect you to play it 24/7.
Yeah, I mean, Halo is definitely at a point where it needs a complete overhaul, which we thought Halo Infinite was going to be. And I will give 343 credit. Halo Infinite's multiplayer is a world of difference
It's better
from
now.
now and it was then
Yes.
when it launched. It still just comes down to the campaign of Halo Infinite. While you did do the open world concept fairly well, it was just a lot of reused assets. It was a lot of boring areas where you're going down an identical looking corridor and stuff. So when it comes to the campaign, I want to see them basically do what the Coalition is doing. Go back to your roots.
Yes.
Like,
Yep.
don't try to reinvent the wheel or anything. Go back to the roots of what made Halo that monumental generation defining game that it was back in 2001. And if you can do that with the campaign, you already have the core for a solid multiplayer experience. You know what you have to deliver with a multiplayer. You can build from that. But just go back to the roots. Don't go crazy with too many Frankenstein type options. Just go give us a cohesive gaming experience that is set in the Halo universe with Master Chief, and the fans will be happy. They tried to expand too quickly, and I don't think they really had a cohesive vision on exactly what they wanted to do. It was a lot of scrambling and kind of a shotgun approach of, hey, if this hits, we have a good idea, then we'll get rid of the others. And it was just too much of a shotgun. It didn't hit any targets. Then they started to consolidate over the last couple of years with Halo Infinite's multiplayer, and they had a cohesive vision. And that's why some players return to it saying, wow, Halo Infinite's multiplayer is really good now. You have the new weapons, the maps, the game modes, all of this. It's a fun experience. And even back at launch, you could tell Halo Infinite's multiplayer had the makings to be an enjoyable, entertaining multiplayer game. It was just so many finer things missing that kept it from elevating itself to where it belonged. And by the time it got to the state it needed to be in, a lot of that fan base moved on. Still an active fan base, but a lot of people moved on, and it's very hard to bring those people back in. And that's the case with all games as a service or live service games. You have to do something exceptionally well to bring people back. And Halo Infinite, despite all of its efforts, just hasn't done enough to bring people in. But ideally, a brand new release can do that.
You know what's interesting? I'm looking at this a bit with like what we see with Gears right now. We're doing E-Day, and then they're going back technically. They're not going forward as much for Gear 6, and they're going back to fan favorites, right, with the characters and stuff. Maybe Halo could use that remake for Combat Evolved. Maybe that's not a bad, because originally I heard that and I said, that is strange because we have that anniversary edition where you switch between the old visuals and the new visuals and stuff. Like, maybe that's not a bad idea now I'm thinking about it. What if they did go back and they remake it and you have like those levels like the Silent Cartographer and stuff that look awesome, new kind of gameplay sort of, but still keeps to the old, classic style. And it just feels like back in the day when you first turned it on, just all over again for this. Maybe that is something that they can build off of there. And then eventually it works into, I don't know, they call it Halo 6 or something. They just call it something new with Halo. Because they can also, with that remake, they could play around with some events in the game and try to set up the story maybe for potentially a reboot or something that they're going towards. I don't know. Maybe it's not a bad idea, though. And maybe they do make it multi-platform, as was kind of suggest. Oh, we're kicking this around. Okay. Maybe you do get it on Nintendo's next system. Maybe you do get it on PlayStation at some point, and Halo's just in front of everyone you can get it to. Okay. It would still be weird, but I think right now Halo kind of needs a jumpstart like that. And I think it would be really popular either way when they did that. If they put it on other platforms, great. If they kept it on Xbox, PC, there you go. But I think going back to the roots is the move.
I think going back to the roots, and I think timing are also significant factors. Because let's say this Halo 1 remake would come out around the launch of the next-gen Xbox. At that point, you almost would want to keep it exclusive because that's a selling point. That's a reason to buy that system, to play this Halo 1 remake. If this is a game that's coming out, let's just say 2025 to give it a time window, who cares? Make it multi-platform. Because this generation is over for the Xbox. It's not going to be turned around. It's not going to compete with the PlayStation 5 at this point. At this point, Microsoft just has to deliver quality games and keep goodwill among the consumer base and pump out the quality leading up to the next generation launch. That's whether 2026, 2027, whenever it is. That has to be their goal, and to keep Game Pass sustainable. But if you can launch with something like a Halo Combat Evolved, then I would keep it exclusive. But timing is definitely a huge factor here. And, if they are to revisit the first Halo game, you have to do a better effort than what you did with the Halo Anniversary or the Master Chief Collection version, because a lot of the atmosphere was lost in that conversion. So
yeah,
you really have to do a much better job than what you previously did.
See, there's Tamale says, been a Halo player ever since day one of Halo CE in 2001, and I'm really enjoying Infinite. But yes, we're waiting for a new release. Can't wait. They're working on the next Halo. They've already hinted at it and basically outright said it multiple times. So a new Halo is coming. Go figure. It's just, I really hope 343 gets this one right. We'll see. Andy Ackerman says, sorry I'm late. I guess I'm on Team Nate tonight. Sometimes you got to root for the bad guy.
Wait, what?
Okay, Nate.
What did I do?
Let's get down to business. We've referenced Gamescom multiple times. They are going to have apparently their biggest booth yet there. So I want to talk about Gamescom very briefly, but I've seen a lot of people in the chat mention this. There are some games that just skipped Xbox randomly. There's two specifically I want to bring up, but technically during limited runs show, there were, I'd say half of those games are just not on Xbox. Mm-hmm. And there are probably multiple reasons for that I'd say mostly involve sales, amount that you have to print in terms of the disc, that kind of thing, license agreements. So I get it. But two that are frustrating people currently include the Marvel vs. Capcom fighting game collection, because that has Marvel vs. Capcom 2 in it, and Black Myth Wukong. So here's the interesting thing. Today, we had a response put out there, that was Windows Central, from Microsoft. And in this response, they kind of alluded to there being I don't say last minute, but very recent deal from Sony. Did you see this? Did you see this quote?
I saw a vague mention of it, but
okay, I'm going to read this to you, and you give me your immediate reaction. This is over on Windows Central. Jez Corden got a response from a Microsoft spokesperson. They said, we're excited for, which the context here, by the way, is that the Xbox Series version is not going to be available at launch in August. Okay, there was speculation that it was the Xbox Series S that may be a problem, might be a bit of a hang up, and they didn't comment any further. They just said it's not going to be there at launch, and they didn't really give a timetable as to when it will happen. It's just not going to be there immediately. Okay, so Microsoft's spokesperson said, we're excited for the launch of Black Myth Wukong on Xbox Series X and S and are working with Game Science to bring the game to our platforms. We can't comment on the deals made by our partners with other platform holders, but we remain focused on making Xbox the best platform for gamers, and great games are at the center of that. So the platforms that Black Myth Wukong is going to is Xbox, PlayStation, and PC, I believe through Steam, which by process of elimination, since this is Xbox, not talking about it not being an Xbox on Xbox day one, the platform holder would be Sony. So this looks kind of like almost is this the last minute deal by Sony, Nate, to keep this game timed exclusive on PlayStation at launch?
It feels exceptionally weird. I mean, the developers of Black Myth Wukong came out at Summer Games Fest and said the reason it's not launching on Xbox day and date is because we don't have the Xbox version optimized to where we would like it to be. We're going to continue to work on the game, so once we get it to the performance that we are comfortable with, the game will release, and when we have further information, we will let you know. I don't know why the developer would come out with that type of statement as opposed to Sony coming out, or even the developers coming out and saying we have this as a timed exclusive. Because when you look at games like Stellar Blade, Rise of the Ronin, Silent Hill 2, Sony's never been shy about, you know, touting that they have a timed exclusive deal on a particular project. So why wouldn't they be doing that with Black Myth Wukong if that were the case? You also have to wonder who exactly was the spokesperson who gave this statement to Windows Central? Are they in position to know of these deals, or is this kind of a generic blanket statement that they gave and they were kind of just talking out of ignorance?
Yeah, that's kind of the context we're missing here. But it seems very strange because while we're talking about Black Myth Wukong, that Marvel versus Capcom fighting game collection, also not on Xbox Series or Xbox One, it is coming to Switch and PlayStation 4 specifically. And apparently the reasoning behind this, and this is once again from Windows Central, who looked into this after, I believe, Jaw Muncher on Twitter X posted up some of the reasoning for this, and it had to do with MT Framework not necessarily having a pipeline for development to the Xbox console at all, Xbox One or Xbox Series, which I think looking at this now, it does make a bit more sense why there's no PS5 version than if that is the case. Like, this is on PS4 and it'll work backwards compatible on the PS5. That's how that's happening. The Switch, I guess they had pipeline for it because it was worth it. It's like, you know what, we're the Switch, there you go, we're going to set this thing up. We can't go backwards compatible with the Wii U or something to it.
Right.
So I'm looking at this and I'm really confused as to why this keeps happening to Microsoft, where they're just like constantly, I don't know if they're unaware or they're just on their back foot a lot with this kind of stuff. To me, if you hear that Capcom is having a hard time with this, and it's something like this isn't the only one. There's been multiple games that run on MT Framework that are not getting to the Xbox. And at first I was like, well, maybe Capcom is just struggling when it comes to sales or something, like, whatever. But it seems like it's just MT Framework in general. You feel like if you're Microsoft, you get in there and try to make this work, because Marvel vs. Capcom is, I'm not going to say this game's going to do like 10, 15 million copies, but it does have significance in terms of its availability right now, because we saw what happened to it. It got delisted, got pulled down. It was a big thing. But it just seems like something that makes that kind of a splash, where obviously it's a big deal when your logo doesn't pop up. So like, this seems like a situation. We just talked about how Clair Obscur, they were there. They recognized the development of it. They're like, okay, this is a good one to get in the Game Pass. But then I have to imagine they saw this and they're like, no problem. It's probably, all right, it's fine. It's Marvel vs. Capcom. And then you see everything that happens online. It seems strange for Microsoft to have the means that they do, the capital that they do, and just constantly almost be surprised by this.
It's a difficult position for them to be in, because let's say it is the MT Framework situation, where there hasn't been official MT Framework support on Xbox One since 2021 or 2022. And it's never been ported over to PlayStation 5 or Xbox Series, because Microsoft has essentially shifted fully to the RE engine at this point. So if you're Microsoft in this situation, your only option would be to go to Capcom and say, we will pay for you to do the port. But the problem then becomes Capcom needs to have the available employees who are familiar with MT Framework on the Xbox. So you need people to make that team. This isn't a project that Microsoft could have came in and said, hey, we can lend you some of our engineers, because they're not familiar with this engine. So it definitely has to come from Capcom internally. So it's definitely a very weird situation. And I've seen some online speculation where, is it due to sales? Is it due to something else not related to MT Framework? If it were coming to PlayStation 5 as a native version, then I think we would have enough backing to dismiss the MT Framework angle. But the fact that it is a PlayStation 4 release, that alone, I think, is sufficient to say, okay, this is related to the engine. This isn't a concern about sales or anything like that. This is an engine issue, and Capcom doesn't have the pipeline, the tools, the employees, the team essentially to do an Xbox One version of the game. And it is a damn shame because Marvel vs. Capcom 2 on the original Xbox is how I played that game. So I just have that
There's
familiarity with the friend. Yeah, there's that legacy, the familiarity that this is where that franchise
Mm-hmm.
was home for me. And now I'm going to have to choose between the PlayStation or the Switch. And each one has a pro and con. The con for the Switch is that that D-pad is terrible. The con for the PlayStation is that's the fighting game community system. And I'm going to go online with Marvel vs. Capcom 2 and fight those people? Oh, dear God. Doesn't sound fun.
Well, let's be real. You're going to get lit up either way. So the people who play Marvel vs. Capcom religiously are insane at the game. I'm not going online expecting that. What I wanted to do with the game, because I remember it very, very much so from the Dreamcast. But as you mentioned, from the original Xbox, that's mostly where I played it too. I just like going through the game and unlocking all the people because there were so many people to unlock. You beat the game. I remember Cable was really good at beating the last boss. You get like the points and you go to the little store they had and you had to leave and go in over and over again until the right character or something showed up and you'd buy them. And it was really fun filling out that massive grid with new characters. That was fun.
Yeah.
But the thing, so I think the reason people were looking at sales, Nate, and like maybe that's what it is, it's because we did that Capcom leak a while ago, and like, so Phoenix Wright, I understand that one, why that might not go to Xbox at times, because we had those sales numbers where on the Xbox it didn't even sell 5,000 copies, and it's like, well, okay, maybe that's not going to. I feel like Marvel vs. Capcom would do well on the Xbox. I don't think that'd be a problem, or at least within reason, right? To other platforms.
Yeah,
I don't think that's when they look at it and be like, oh, this thing's not going to crack 5,000 sold.
It would do well enough for what it needs to do. In relation to the release itself, I think it would do fine.
This is a situation where Microsoft has that legacy team. Hey, they said this on, again, Nate, the interview stuff, coming back to them. They said that they are very serious about preservation for games, making it available to a wide number of people. You know what? You have that team that you brought back together. I feel like you make some calls
Marvel
to Capcom.
versus Capcom to make it.
I think you make some calls and you figure this thing out. It was on the Xbox and it got delisted. Like, there is a version out there.
If that were a viable option and they could come in and say, okay, $20, here is Marvel vs. Capcom 2.
That's all people really care about. Let's be real.
Yeah. I mean, if they could go that route,
yeah,
it'd be a really interesting kind of counterpunch where it'd be like, whoa, I can get the original version. That's exciting. I mean, it'd probably just be a very convoluted conversation where you'd have to go through Disney. You'd have to go through Capcom.
That's true.
And we're assuming that there's no changes with the collection versus the original version as well.
Oh, people are going to spot that either way. We'll know. When this thing comes out, we'll know.
Like,
people will take a fine.
I'm assuming it's the exact same game because Arcade 1-Up had put out this game. What was it, about a year and a half ago? So I think it would be really interesting if Microsoft could have that conversation for backwards compatibility. But if you were to have that conversation, like, let's just say this is something Capcom is holding in their back pocket, like Gambit, and they're going to do it at Gamescom as an announcement. No, you would have to get out ahead of it immediately. As soon as it was announced during the Direct, Capcom and Microsoft should have had a PR blast saying, come into the backwards compatibility program later this summer.
Yeah.
Like, you can't hold something like that back. But I'd like to think Microsoft had that conversation of just saying, hey, is this something we could do? Even Sony. Sony has PlayStation 2 games now on PlayStation Plus Classic.
Yeah, that's true. I feel like that, but with the likenesses and stuff, those wouldn't stay up for. I would want this game physically, basically. That's what I'm saying. Like, let's be real. This thing is going to go away eventually digitally. Let's just be honest. This thing's going away at some point. Get it physically. I would tell everyone out there now, you might want to get 2 copies. It's going to be like that, I think. So the way that we see these big companies go back and forth and fight over these different properties, yeah, I would pick it up on disc or on cartridge is what I'll say. So that's what I want for Microsoft as well. I want it on an Xbox disc.
Yeah, I see. I probably would have picked the game up on the Xbox. Not that the D-pad is amazing, but it just has that legacy and the history for me on the platform, and I'm
A little weird.
kind of wondering. See, you used to play the game. You play the game back on the Dreamcast, Xbox, PS2. Does anyone know what Cyclops says when he does the uppercut? Because I always thought he said Jesus Christ.
I don't know. I didn't really use Cyclops like that.
But you know the move, like he did the whole movie. Did Jesus Christ? What did he say?
Someone in the chat can probably tell. Did you were you around people when that happened and you guys would just say it out loud when he did it?
Yeah, like we would be plotting to do the move. We'd be like, ready, here we go, Jesus Christ.
Someone could probably say what it was. I did use the Dreamcast D-pad somewhat recently. I picked up the controller, and I don't know how I didn't get blisters on my finger from that. Like, I know you use the joystick, but like other games that use D-pad heavily, that one, that's a sharp D-pad. This one is clicky, so I don't know how fun that would be. You might want to get like a third part. Like, remember they used to sell those third-party Street Fighter ones that had the really nice rolling D-pad? But I don't know. I don't know what he said.
Dominic Malta saying he said Jesus Christ.
See what?
That's what I thought he said every time he did it. Like we would just yell it out every time. Jesus Christ. I mean, he definitely wasn't saying that.
You don't want to know what he says because in your mind, that's what he said. Like you'll just ruin a childhood memory forever if you find out.
I know, but I need to know what he says. 20 years later, I need to know what he's actually saying.
It's like when you look up lyrics to a song and in your mind it was saying something and then you see it and you're like, oh man, that just ruined everything. What is this world now?
I mean, so far nobody has the answer. The only answer we have is from Dominic saying that's what he said.
Hey, somebody get Maximilian Dude on the line. Okay. We'll figure this out. We'll figure it out.
It was definitely Cyclops who did it. Jesus
Cyclops
Christ.
did not Nightcrawler.
I mean, I'll look it up right now on YouTube.
Okay, you get to the bottom of this one, Nate. We did real quick. We do have Gamescom. We'll finish up with this. What are we expecting from this? Because they have now said that this is their biggest show at Gamescom to date. And I guess based on the amount of games that they're going to be attending with, it makes sense that they would have large booths. What I'm wondering is, do you think we will know the release date for things like Indiana Jones and Avowed before the show, or do you think these things get release dates there and that's one of their big reveals? Nate is
looking for the clip.
Cyclops' transcript while he's fighting.
I mean, I would like to think that we would have the release dates ahead of then, especially if the games are coming out, let's say October or November. But at the same time, given that they weren't willing to give us the release dates in June, I guess holding them for the second half of August and dating them in, an 8-week window following that wouldn't be too shocking. I would also imagine that these games would have some demos and such at Gamescom, so people can get the first hands-on impressions of Avowed and Indiana Jones and all of that. I mean, at this point, we're almost in the first week of July. We're about 6 weeks away from Gamescom. They would probably hold those release dates until Gamescom just to give, or opening night live with Jeff Keighley, something like that, just to give it a little bit of incentive for people to view the Xbox show. Because if we have the release dates, do you really need to see another trailer for Indiana Jones to know you have interest in it at this point?
No, I don't. That's what I mean. I'd like to get a release date so I know when it's coming out. We're getting to a point where we're getting a time of year where you start to kind of look and figure out what you're going to buy for the holidays, for like most people, or in some of our cases, trying to figure out what you're going to be playing at that time, scheduling out maybe for videos or that sort of thing, reviews, especially if people are reviewing a lot of the stuff. So it is kind of that position where you're like, I'd like to know when this thing is coming out. If it is coming out this year, which we do assume it is, because they keep saying 2024. That's sort of my take on it right now. Is I'd like to get these release dates. I wouldn't mind hearing some hands-on impression for things like Avowed and Indiana Jones at that time. I think if they have those to demo, great. We'll hear about it then. I'm ready to find out when it's coming out because I'm sold on Indiana Jones. Avowed, I mean, it's going to go into Game Pass, so I'll try it. But I will admit, Avowed, I'm kind of like, we'll see. But Indiana Jones, I'm sold on. So if that's what they have for us, and then some things like they had Age of Mythology, they mentioned that, Aura History Untold, then I think it'll be a good show. I just don't know if there's anything massive coming out of it. So we'll see.
Yeah, I was looking at their show from last year. There was nothing too substantial, but the fact that they went out of their way following the June showcase and said, "Oh, there was more we could have shown you," makes you wonder, did you hold back an announcement or two for Gamescom? Also, you have Tokyo Game Show a month later, where last year is when they had the epic moment of Phil Spencer and Square Enix's CEO shaking hands and furthering their commitment to supporting each other. So you have to wonder what could be held for Tokyo Game Show as well, because everyone's waiting for that moment when Final Fantasy 16 is announced for the Xbox. Which of those two showcases would really be more beneficial? Would you rather do it at Gamescom or do it at Tokyo Game Show? If I had to choose between the two, I would say Tokyo, because you're catering to that Japanese audience a little bit, but either one would be a fine venue because it's going to generate hype among the Xbox fan base. So going into Gamescom right now, I'm just kind of anticipating some release announcements for the games that we already know are coming this year. And, maybe there's an announcement or two. I'm still surprised Microsoft hasn't done a substantial Game Pass announcement regarding Call of Duty. And last Gamescom, we did get a look at Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3's campaign a little deeper. So maybe at Gamescom this year is when they drop those Game Pass games and the Call of Duty franchise on the service. Because
get that ball rolling.
We have no Activision games on Game Pass at this moment. So beyond what, Diablo 4. But where's that big drop? Where's Spyro and Crash, Tony Hawk, Call of Duty? Where's that large roster of games that are now under your ownership? So maybe Gamescom has something Game Pass related of that magnitude.
I think that'd be big for a lot of people going into it from what you kind of expected at Gamescom. I think that would be a big announcement for them. You're right, the Tokyo Game Show right around the corner, and the anticipation of Square Enix being involved once again with their show, maybe Final Fantasy 16. That's probably something that people would look towards more. But Gamescom is big, and I think Call of Duty might be the move. That might be. So I think it's good. We are going to do an after show for like 20 or 25 minutes with the Patreon members. So we'll jump over there very soon. I do have it listed up over on the Patreon, by the way, over on spawncastnetwork.com. If you go over there now, I have a post with the stream that we'll do with the members. So shout out to everyone once again supporting us. That you can check that out, link down below in the description. But I think that's going to do it here for DirectXbox number 20. A fly has found its way in here somehow. So I'll have to deal with that in the after show. And thanks everyone for tuning in. Nate, any departing words as we move over to the patron?
Some people in the chat are saying Cyclops says gene splice. Whether that is true or not, I don't care. He says Jesus Christ. That's
Thank you, Davies
reality.
Gaming. Stellar Blade Halo crossover. Shout out to Davies Gaming.
Dear God.
It's good if you get that reaction from Nate. Thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with DirectXbox. And if you are going out too many games, myself and many other members of the Spawncast and everything will be there. So come by, check us out in the greater Philadelphia area. It'll be a lot of fun. And we will catch you guys next time.
Jesus Christ.